Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Philip, for that introduction, and a huge thank you to GS1 UK for the invitation to speak this morning. I'm speaking today in my capacity, not only as Chief Scientific Officer for NHS England, but as the person leading the introduction of genomics and genomic medicine into the NHS to fundamentally change the way in which we care for patients. I'm just going to go back and reiterate something that Philip said much earlier on, and this is to illustrate the fact that it's a diverse system that we're trying to implement a set of initiatives within. And particularly if we just focus only on the hospital sector, there's 153 hospital organisations. But within the NHS itself, in England, there are over 1.3 million staff. But what makes it unique, and what makes it unique in terms of us being able to initiate a project such as genomic medicine, is because it is in a semi-integrated healthcare system that's publicly funded. But that does come with a number of challenges as we start to implement something into a set of diverse organisations. What we do know, though, is that within modern healthcare, we do require increasing standardisation. We need much more streamlined ways of working, particularly within those organisations and across those organisations. And we really need to adopt science and technology and all that it can bring, including the ability to interrogate and analyse large data sets. The Department of Health and the NHS itself recognises the importance of identifying and tracking products, person, places and processes, which will drive the three key elements of our healthcare system around clinical effectiveness, improving our patient experience and ensuring that patients get safe care. GS1 standards are now mandated through the National Information Board strategy, the e-procurement strategy and the NHS standard contract. So it's embedded within those. The challenge is how it's implemented, and we've heard a fantastic example of what one organisation is doing in Derby to take this forward. We now, in terms of thinking about how we get all of the players in the healthcare system working together, have, for example, new EU regulations on medical devices and in vitro diagnostics that requires GS1 standards for tracking and in terms of implementation. But what we've now got is a number of initiatives, including the NHS contribution to the 100,000 Genomes project, that have specified the use of GS1 standards. So why is genomic medicine so important? It's the game changer in 21st healthcare delivery. This is why so many countries across the world have a number of different genomic initiatives. And I was just recently in Athens at the Global Genomic Medicine Collaborative Conference where 50 different countries presented. What we do have in the UK, though, is we have an advantage in that we're trying to mainstream genomic technologies, our ability to sequence all the single letters in an individual's genetic code within the national health system. That's important not only in terms of where it places the UK in the world, but because of all these initiatives, what we have to do is have traceability, but our ability to share de-identified data across the world, not only in support of projects with patient care at its centre and driving improved diagnostics and the development of new drugs, but importantly, to enhance the clinical interpretation of the complex data that is generated to understand whether this is important in a single individual. So as we move forward with this work, and certainly we move forward with this work in the UK, an important part of our relationship will be aligning our National Health Service and the data they generate with industry endeavour and with research and development endeavour. What is genomic medicine then? Conventional medicine works backwards from usually a set of symptoms and tests to come to a diagnosis, with often a very one-size-fits-all to treatment, where treatments are only 30 to 50% effective in the conditions that we treat. Genomic medicine and looking at all the individual letters in an individual's genetic code, so there are 3 billion letters, enable us to understand the underlying cause of a condition. In some patients, it enables us to understand if they've got a predisposition for developing a disease. For example, that might be cancer. But it allows us, importantly, to understand which drugs will work and which ones won't. And that's important as we've got, for example, in the National Health Service in England, a rising cost of the drugs that are prescribed. So currently in England, we spend around £16 billion on drugs. That is set to rise to over 20 billion. We perform something like 10 billion, we spend about £10 billion on diagnostics, including some genomics, but not at the level of sequencing all the individual letters in a genetic code, but we don't bring the two together. So genomic medicine enables individuals to get earlier and better treatment that's tailored to their very precise underlying genetic cause of their disease. Why now? We can do it because the cost of sequencing all of those individual letters has come down such that it's less than £500. It costs nearly $3 billion to sequence the first human genome. That was just over a decade ago. But importantly, it's our ability to combine big data sets. So this has been a journey, certainly in the UK, we've been on since the discovery of DNA by Watson and Crick in 1953, and in the joint initiative with the US in 2000, that was the first draft from the 100 Genome Project. But in 2012, our then Prime Minister announced a new way in which the NHS would use our ability to sequence all the letters in an individual's genetic code and to sequence 100,000 whole genomes from patients with rare disease and their families and common cancers. And this was unique in terms of the initiatives across the world, because it has been mainstreamed into the NHS right from the very beginning. And it was seen as the opportunity to form the basis of a genomic medicine service for the NHS for the entire 55 million population it was served. In 2015, in NHS England, our board took the decision to announce an NHS-wide strategic approach to personalised medicine, building upon the contribution to the 100,000 Genomes Project, but also to enable us to take forward initiatives that would lead to a sustainable NHS for the future. And just over 6 weeks ago, I took to our board our plans to create the genomic medicine landscape in the NHS from 2018 that includes the ability to introduce into routine care for all eligible patients our ability to sequence all of those individual letters of a person's genetic code. In particular, for the 100,000 Genomes Project, that's seen really as the testbed, the proof of concept, we have to collect, in rare disease, blood samples from the patient, and in many cases, their close relatives. In patients with cancer, we have to collect both the blood sample from the patient and also the tissue sample from the tumour, and then extract DNA from this, and collect a range of other samples that enable us to understand what any individual change in a genetic code means in terms of that individual and how they function. This ability to collect and extract DNA and then to sequence the genetic code is linked through to a diagnostic and clinical record and a set of particular data sets that have to be populated. Such, for example, in rare disease, there are some 1,000 data fields that have to be populated as part of this project. What we did from the very beginning, though, was to ensure that all participating centres were working to a set of common languages in terms of informatics and data, because standardisation and comparability, both across the NHS and our ability to share that de-identified data with other nations and other initiatives, is essential if we're really going to give a 21st century service for patients. And so the contract that we entered into the NHS mandated a range of national and international standards, including these that you can see here. And that specifically mandated the use of GS1 for sample tracking within the 100,000 Genomes project. What we did in terms of the infrastructure is we created 13 NHS genomic medicine centres in England, and we're now working with Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales as they create their own genomic medicine centres. We contract with one lead organisation who work with local hospitals. That's really important because we've given 13 lead organisations the responsibility for ensuring that GS1 standards, SNOMED CT implementation and other informatics and data standards are embedded in each of their participating hospitals. By the end of this project, we'll have some 85 hospitals in England working in the project. The next stage is making sure we roll it out. We contracted them to deliver against a very precise specification and common protocols. That includes clear information standards and an external quality assurance system. In the West Midlands, which I meant to say, is all 18 trusts, acute hospital trusts, are participating in the study. This is the journey, so the sample is collected from the patient to the local hospital. There's initial processing, they're collated by the lead organisation, so samples have to be tracked across here, so tracked across those geographies from all the participating organisation. They go to the National Sequencing Facility in Cambridge, and then samples are stored in the UK Biobank. And in parallel, patient data enters a national genomic data centre. So what's been the importance of GS1 to genomic medicine? The size of the project meant we needed to have clear and effective sample tracking that could operate on a national basis. Genomic samples have particular ethical sensitivity about what they might mean for an individual and their family, particularly, for example, in relation to insurance, even though we have entered into an agreement, a moratorium with the insurance companies. But effective genomic medicine requires prompt processing, results and actions, but importantly, we need to ensure that we've got the right patient because of the outcome that will happen with the data that's generated. So patients have particularly high expectations about their samples and about the use of their data, and particularly that they're safe and they're not misplaced. Analysis of tracking data and any bottlenecks really provides useful management information. This was the journey in the Northwest before they started it. So they were using their local systems for identification and tracking of clinical samples. They were just transcribing information, and the tracking system was much less robust, with greater risk of samples misplaced in transit. They did a cross-GMC adoption in the Northwest of the GS1 tracking system. Information is only entered once. There's global unique identifiers that avoid confusion and patient safety, and the precise location of any given sample can be determined from multiple locations. And there's common pathways now opening up for all samples that come into laboratories, not just those that are part of this project or part of genomics. And you can see from the quote here that it's enabled better use of skill mix and of healthcare resources. In Addenbrooke's hospitals, they've implemented barcode labelling for all samples, eliminating 99.9% of all sample areas. They're already using GS1 for high-value devices, but they've used this approach and the project that they've been working with to drive changes across all of their laboratories. So there's been a 6-fold increase in sample processing using GS1 tracking from 20 million samples per year to 120 million. And in North Thames, not far from here in London, they've delivered GS1 capability across all 7 big acute trusts in London and that part. So what are our lessons? It's been structured to drive transformation. There's been requirements in a national contract. We've had champions in senior management and clear leadership to affect change. We've brought people together to share good practice and enthusiasm. We've been able to use sample flow to inform and improve changes. Interoperability has been the greatest challenge, and the IT infrastructure itself. And where organisations are more digitally mature, it's been easier. But some central investment has been critical to make sure that this has been implemented. Where is it taking us? This is the bedrock for genomic medicine, where we'll start to bring all of this data together, track it, combine it with the individual tailored approach, whether it's for drugs, for devices, or other forms of intervention. So to deliver an end-to-end solution for a particular patient that enables us also to track the resources we heard about earlier. But importantly, all of this data will also enter into a national genomic database in a de-identified way, with samples having been tracked and the provenance and traceability understood, so that this can further develop our collaborations across the world with industry and also with research and development. This will help us drive and improve population health, earlier disease detection, more targeted disease prevention, enable cutting-edge research, provide accelerated diagnosis, and enable us to target therapies and better use of our resources. So it will enable us to improve quality and outcomes, address inequalities, and to drive value-based healthcare. But the infrastructure, and particularly the informatics and data infrastructure, has to evolve. So where next? It's rolling this out into the whole of the mainstream NHS care, starting in 2018, ramping up to 2021, supporting the development of an integrated laboratory structure with the full range of diagnostic expertise, but linking that with the drugs and devices and other interventions, and particularly how we optimise medicines. Supporting the rollout to all NHS locations because of our intention to create NHS genomic medicine centres until 2021, and then to support digital diagnostic services and the development of the National Genomic Database. But you can see in here, this will also include the mainstreaming of genomic medicine in primary care, and also linking to our community pharmacy colleagues and across the pathway. And then just finally, what this has been seen, and it's not just in this country, that genomic medicine really is our moonshot moment. It is something that we've had to embrace, and we've got to embrace for the future. And it's a rapidly advancing field, but GS1 is a critical part of us being able to do this and able to do it safely. Thank you very much.